And welcome back to WAAAGH Wednesday. We're here to talk about the WAAAGH exceptions. Whoa! So this week, boys, we're gonna go over the stats, how everybody's feeling going into what's to come with possible point changes. But in the meantime, I want to take a look at a couple exceptions from this last weekend. So we have a Cult of Speed player, a Stompa making its appearance. We're going to take a look at stat checks graph and how the Orks win rate is looking. And just all in all, stay in high spirits before the data slate changes. So let's get stuck in, lads. Before we get stuck in, we got to talk about our sponsors, the Baron of Dice. So they've allowed us to do our paint competition. Shout out to Baron of Dice for their exceptional dice. Check them out in our description, 5% off the discount because nobody likes taxes. So of course, shout out to Baron of Dice. And like always, boys, we're going to have to give love to the players that came up this weekend. So we have had, let me pull this up real quick. Some players that ended up doing great. I'm pulling up stat checks thing. I should have pulled this up earlier. Poo, 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 poo. So I'm screen sharing this one. Sorry, boys, for that one. I don't know why I did that. And Windows tab. Yeah, that's red. Sorry, this is what I was supposed to be sharing. That's what I'm supposed to be sharing. So we're going to take a look at the Ork players of this last weekend, but I want to show Meta Monday's little graph. Let me zoom in. It says, oh, actually, you guys can see how this is. So, because it just reset itself for me. Did it? Yes, it did. So, we're at Meta Monday 10th edition graphs. You can actually check these guys out. I'll zoom in so you can actually see. Don't worry. I'm not going to leave you high and dry. So, we're going to pull up the Orks and their weekends, their win rate since 7, and it goes all the way to 23. Unnecessary, as you can see. That's why I did a bunch of those. So we're going to go from 7-7. You can see me do this live all the way to as of now. Because Meta Monday didn't post, we're not using his stats. So we got to do this somewhat long ways around, but that's fine. I had this up already, but for some reason it reset when I opened this. So now you can see the actual graph on how the Orks have been looking in the stat check, right? So you can see Orks were sitting all the way down here as of 7-7 in the win rates at a 35% win rate, just hanging down low and dry. There we go. I zoomed in so you guys can actually see, hopefully, right? So it stayed up to 35% win rate. And as we've slowly come along the months, so 7-14, 7-21, 7-8-4, now we're into the 40% zone. So only among the end of the month after the data slate changes that we get into the red zone. Before that, we were just sitting at 35% win rate. Slowly since then, we've been rising maybe 1% or 0.5% on average for 3 weeks going on. For so 8-4, 8-20 through 8-25, we're sitting at a 41% win rate, and all the way up to, as of just recently, with 9-22, 9-29, we've gone just above 45, right? And of course, there's been a couple reasons for that. Some of it have been the big team events where a lot of the big bad players have been going together in faction specialists. So they've been now winning events in the same way. And maybe how the meta slowly shifted a little bit. But I like to think people are taking their gas off the pedal off the gas because they know the points are to come. GW announced it, so we got that going on next week. But this is why Orks are kind of looking that hopefully we get something. A lot of people are saying, well, don't keep your hopes up, you never know. And I'm one of those people that kind of agrees with them because yes, we have stat check. Thanks, shout out to stat check for pulling up graphs like this. But whenever GW puts up their balance data slate percentages and what they have people's win rates, it really never matches up to any of the other sources that the community puts together, right? So we have what we look at as stats and the people that we trust, and then GW will just throw up some random numbers that sometimes aren't equivalent to that. So even though this is pretty good and it's a good summary, we really just don't know what GW is going to do. But I'm under the appeal that they'll at least give us a little bit of attention, even if it's not in all the same places that we always want it to be. But with that being said, I want to talk about the players that had their performance this weekend. So we're going to start off with, and shout out to the paint competition with, oops, that's not the right one to start off with. Yeah. I want to start off with Kult of Speed. So I'm in the mood to start off Kult of Speed. I switched it up. I was in the Stompa. I decided to do Kult of Speed first. So we have this Blake Jones. So Blake Jones actually went to a 5-round event, ended up going 4-0-1. So he did end up getting a tie. We are going to talk about his tie. This was in Australia. Shout out to the Aussies down under. We do know that they have their odd meta, their unique meta as a whole, where some people are like, where do guys come up with these lists? And where do these guys come up with these theories and ideas? That's just a native to Australia. Sometimes that's just the beauty behind 40K, right? So we're going to take a look at Blake Jones and everything that he had to go into this. So let's look at his list real quick before we go over his win path, because it was a bit fun, shocking a bit. So we have Ghaz-led Thraka. Yes, you have Ghaz-led Thraka in the Cult of Speed. I'll talk about that. We have a beast boss on foot, and no, he doesn't have the enhancement, faster than use. He doesn't have it. I triple checked. I just pulled it up BCP while we're talking to make sure he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. I did check. 1 unit of Beast Snagger Boys, of course, for the Beast Boss. Yes, it was singles, from what I can see, right? He says Aussie meta on its own. Beast Snagger builds a lot in general. Yeah, I'll pull it up again. This doesn't look like it was a teams event, as it says, right? I don't think so, right? Yeah. 2 days, players played over 2 days. Yeah, it's an event. Okay, making sure. Yeah. I was like, it was not a teams event, from what I could tell. From what I looked at, it was a simple 2-day, 5-round event. But yeah, the Aussie meta is kind of weird, so that's why it's kind of fun to look at this. Like I said, though, we have a Beast Boss, Beast Snagger Boys, 2 units of Gretchen, base Gretchen, 2 Mega Knobs. They both have a Power Claw and a Kill Saw. The reason you do that is just for the option of what you're going into. You're going to pick. If you're going to have to punch a Land Raider, pick your Kill Saw. If you're going to just punch a bunch of units that are at strength T4, then you're going to pick your Power Claw. 2 units of Storm Boys, 1 minimum size unit of Squig Hog Boys. Yeah, dude, he brought that in his Cult of Speed, the unit of Squig Hog Boys. 3 minimum size unit of Bikers, 2 Battle Wagons, and then 3 Def Coptas. So he went through all the Def Coptas anyways. That's something that he wasn't really willing to concede, right? Def Copters, you don't want to concede them, mostly because the damage 3 and because of the 4-up invuln. The fact that in this detachment you can get a 4-up invuln for that unit, that's something that is almost unheard of for orcs to actually have access to a 4-up invuln. So that's beautiful. You have it in ablative wounds, in mobile wounds that can reactionary move. They could be defending themselves with the invuln. So this ends up being the core thick part of your list. It's harder to kill than people anticipate. But he also bought 2 battle wagons. What's surprising though, right, Gitz, is that he did not bring faster than use. That was just baffled me. He really thought the Squigs were worth it. He brought Squigs, kept all the war bikers in their minimum size units, and it looks like he put Ghaz in there. He did only keep one of these as hard case, right? And the other one is just susceptible to Ghaz. So he's taking Ghaz, throwing Ghaz in a battle wagon, taking a Beast Boss with Beast Snagger Boys, putting him in another battle wagon, and then just chucking it up the field. That's what he's doing. He just chucked up all this off the field. Most of the time, you'd be like, well, here's this is what I'd normally say, right? As I'm looking this for conjecture, I'd say, well, when you have Ghaz-led Thraka, you stick him in the middle of the table. He exits kind of like your mid-table threat. If someone tries to stat check you and bully you, Ghaz comes out and punches them for you. Not in this case. This case, he put him in the battle wagon. My guy just went full straight pedal to the metal, ran people down. He decided to run people down. I'm sure there were some games where he was more cagey and cheeky, but he doesn't have the big bricks of war bikers that are pretty much common in this detachment. It's pretty fun to see. The Squig Hog Boys were just like another unit where it's like, nah, dude, he didn't bring bikers. He just brought more cavalry. So, yeah, let's take a look at some of his paths to victory. Of course, the Aussies meta be all over the place, but that's so awesome. It's so rare, guys, to see Cult of Speed in singles actually get anywhere close to this, right? The best I've seen them in singles do is 3 and 2, just straight up, right? And that's since the start of the codex dropping. So it's not even just Pariah Nexus. It's since the codex dropped, no one has been able to do this. So shout out to Blake Jones. And yeah, he can do that. And yeah, you could actually put Gratz in the battle wagon as well. And that's always a good option too. You put Gratz, Beast Boss on foot with the Beast Snagger Boys. The Gratz can get out for more OC if a bunch of different units piling out of it. It's awesome. He's just going pedal to the metal. He just keeps one Grat unit in the back. That would make total sense, yes. So super uncalled for. So regardless of what you think of the Aussie meta, regardless of how big this event was, regardless of what his matchups when we go to his win path, It is still exceptional, guys, and that's why I call this episode. This is why I open this episode with. We're looking at the exceptions today because it's so exceptional. And sometimes, guys, you can't count on luck, but luck counts. So you got to be happy about these kind of outcomes when you get them to go, right? When you get someone that gets so good, you just be happy for your fellow Ork player. So we're going into his first matchup. He went into Necrons, the list Awakened Dynasty. We have Luminar Suzeras, a butthead, Orkian the Diviner, Plasmancer, Royal Warden, Technomancer Catan, just basic Transcendent Catan. So he doesn't have a, the anti-vehicle. I'm having a brain fart right now. Anti-vehicle to Catan right now. He does have this Royal Warden, what I was just thinking. Royal Warden normally is nice because you can actually fall back with your Necrons. That's why it just caught my attention when I was reading this list. Because a lot of the time, especially playing Cult of Speed, you're thinking, I'm going to put pressure on you, I'm going to tag you, and then you're going to lose your killing ability as a Necron player, especially for shooting. Royal Warden at least gives you ability to fall back where you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of annoying. But he didn't bring the Nightbringers, I was going to say, or he didn't bring the Void Dragon. Then he has 1 unit of Immortals, a 20-man unit of Brick of Warriors. That's what I'm saying is Warriors are some of those units you want to tag because they're big and stupid and slow. So if you just run up and touch them, they're not going to punch you off them, right? So in this case, he can actually back out. He has a Doomstalker, a Canoptic Reanimator, a big Brick of Wraiths, a Doom Arc, Locust Heavy Destroyers, and a Triarch Stalker. So he does have a respectable amount of firepower on this. But a lot of characters, and not the most killy version of the Necrons. All in all, still respectable, very respectable to see. Whenever I want to just look back at the list, what he does have is a redundance and robustness with those battle wagons. And once you drop that battle wagon, right? Let's just say you're like, okay, he doesn't have the direct output to reliably take out the battle wagon with just shooting. He has the heavy destroyers, he has a Doom Arc, and he has a Doom Stalker. We could do damage, but there's a chance that you could just save it, right? So let's say something like a Transcendent Catan decides that they're going to charge it. Normally, or Luminar Suzeras. Normally, they charge it, they finish it off, and then if something soft's inside, they'll pile into it and touch it. In this case, if you just drop the battle wagon and you drop Ghaz on an objective, boom, you're giving me primary. And 2, if you decide to consolidate into him, you're giving Ghaz a free combat phase. It's most people are not going to be willing to hedge their bets into that. And even if they did, even the Catan goes, well, I have it, I'll take the chance. Well, it's still a big chance you're taking. And then, there's still the rest of the army you've just staged up right in front of. So very nice to see him take out a Necron list. There was some thickness in it between the Wraiths Brick as well. That's where having Ghaz makes a huge difference in that. Having a beast boss with the lethal capability and Ghaz still being together, they're still going to re-roll the hit roll and fish for lethals. So you can still pull down a Catan in that case. Something that most Cult of Speeds would actually have a very hard time with. You can see what this kind of output he had was end up doing, right? I think I backed out of the list real quick. But right here, we have Royal Warden, Plasmancer, Technomancer, Catan. You're looking, these are normal things that are hard to kill. Big Brick of Immortals, big Brick of Necron Warriors, big Brick of Wraiths. Having Ghaz, Beast Boss, Beast Snaggle Boys re-rolling for lethal. Sure, you're not popping them on crit 5s, but you're getting them on 6s. Definitely helps offset the fact that you're normally just in a transport because you have so much stuff that's running up the field as you. You have all the Coptas that can possibly pop off, right? You can't rely on it, guys. If you're building your Cult of Speed list and you're like, look, this is going to be my assured outcome is just from shooting, right? You're not going to have that. You're not going to have that. And you have to think about that as you're looking at Blake Jones' list. He's not looking at my list and saying, hey, I have just shooting from my Cult of Speed list. He very much teched into about 500 points, right? Let me look at it. A little over 500 points, maybe about 750 points of just straight melee, which you would call War Horde melee, right? Units that you would typically say just run a War Horde. He said, no, I'm going to bring that because you need that. With the wall turn to go off, you need something to have some value behind that. And I wouldn't say it's mandatory, guys. Remember, most of these things are generalizations, trying to make evaluations of people lists for why these reasons might be chosen. These are not rules that you have to abide by. These are just suggestions and advice that you may want to listen to depending on what you like to play as and your preferences, right? So maybe he decided, I can't get over the fact that I do nothing on the wall and I want to punch people and really don't like to be stat checked, but I appreciate the 4-up invuln because 4-up invulns on Def Cop to feel amazing. Well, he stuck that all in together and decided he was going to make it work, and you could see how that would work. He has Ghaz for his multi-damage into Wraiths, yet he has the Beast Boss and the Beast Snaggle Boys for something like a Catan. Right away, you can get value and everything from that. And then besides that, you have the Coptas. So let's go into his game 2 real quick. because I'm trying to grasp and trying to help people kind of understand what's going on with this list, as it's very much not the typical version of Cult of Speed that you would see. Then we have the second matchup, Chaos Knights. He says getting wood for spoon. So this player might be notoriously known for not having the best outcomes, just because getting the wooden spoon just means that you kind of lost a lot. But he might be trolling, right? Because his list isn't necessarily not meta. So he has a War Dog Stalker, followed by a Brigand, a Huntsman, a Carnivore, another Carnivore, and then he went for this is why he put wooden spoon, a Chaos Warhound Titan for 1,100 points, followed by 3 Nurglings. The real 3 Nurglings make it somewhat real, just because at least he can infiltrate and kind of create space in that. But a Chaos War Dog Titan. Should I pull that up? I feel like I should just pull up the Chaos War Dog Titan. I'll pull that up in a bit. But of course, we'll just say this isn't the most meta, and Chaos War Dog. Let me pull it up. I'm curious. Sorry, guys. I didn't. That's so stupid. Chaos War Dog Titan, is that a thing? Yeah, Warhound Titan. No, that's not the right one. Whatever. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So whenever you bring in him, if the Stompa is not realistic to bring for 1,100 points, I doubt this Chaos Warhound Titan would be too. I'm sure he's very good at popping something like a Battle Wagon, but then you're really just not playing the mission. This is where you're actually really happy that you have Ghaz and the Beast Boss as well, because normally this kind of stuff would give you a hard time. They'd be really good at popping buggies. They'd be really good at popping bikers. They'd be really good at popping Deathcopters, normal trucks. All would go down to Brigands, Huntsmans, Carnivores. We'll just, dismiss this big time. We're just saying in this matchup, generally, Chaos War Dog spam would already be very difficult for Orks and Cult of Speed. Having those tools doesn't dismiss the fact that he had the tools and assets to actually deal with this, right? You could pull up to something that's a funny list like this, which is another list we're going to look into later on in this stream, the Stompa list, right? Most people look at the Stompa list and say, you're bringing an 800-point model plus a 50-point character to make them work. 850 points for this big dumb brick. You can barely move. Sure, but you can actually lose to a straight-up stat check like that. And in this case, when you're running Cult of Speed, more so than other detachments, yet he still was able to overcome it. So shout out to him for that, even though it wasn't the most realistic, and the player was definitely going to win the ball for wooden spoon for that one. Then we get into his third game where he goes into Death Guard called the Stank. So he have a Biologist Putrefier, 2 of those guys, 2 Foul Blight Spawns, 2 units of Malignant Plaguecasters, Tallyman, and then Typhus. So we know what's here to come, boys, right? Plague Marine spam. So we got 2 big bricks of Plague Marines. They're both going to get both of the characters, so they can get fight first. They can get critical 5+, so they can have lethal 5+. Then we have 3 Rhinos for those 2 big bricks of Marines, but there's obviously something else going in there. We have a unit of Cultists, a unit of Poxwalkers, 2 units of Nurglings, a big old Rodriguez, 3 War Dog Brigands. Now, Rodriguez, he actually gives the ability to half someone's OC. He has a bunch of other abilities as well. He can fight a little bit better. He can give a unit that's Nurgle a +1 damage as well. So there is a little bit of synergy there. Typically, you would go for the 4 Feel No Pain one. Difference, there is a reason for you to bring War Dog Brigands, because War Dog Brigands allow you to pop enemy transports so that your Plague Marines can actually get involved. This is a very character heavy list, as you can see, including with the big thick fat boy. So there is good tools behind this, a little bit more ally heavy than we typically see, but as you know, as just like Orks, Death Guard are kind of dealing with one of those incidental moments in between where they can have a hard time. The one thing about Death Guard that's notoriously known is that they're slow, right? They're slow, and once they do get out of their vehicles, they do start dying, right? Nothing really on this list is super valuable besides Ghaz and that 1 Battle Wagon. Everything else on here is just kind of getting some utility by just existing, right? You're not getting a good train. Those Plague Marines might come out, characters pop out, attack the Deathcopters really rapidly, then 2 more Deathcopters come down, shoot them with all their rockets, they get good blast off it, they get twin linked, 3 damage flat, they start peeling them apart. they diminish that unit right away, then you can run into it and start finishing it off. Even if they do have -1 to hit or even -2 to hit, you do have the Squig Hog boys on this list to start dropping Squig bombs on people to slow them down. They do have to still respect you for the same reason WAAAGH has to respect you for what we spoke about in the first matchup for something like a Catan. Something like WAAAGH is very vulnerable to a beast boss, of course, with Ghaz going off as well, because he is strictly a demon. Therefore, he's going to be taking 4-up saves, and he's not really going to have a good counter to that other than eating it in the face and maybe hoping that he gets a 6-up final pain from Shadow in the Warp, right? So there's definitely tools behind this list that you're finding that it wasn't just that, oh, he's playing Cult of Speed and he caught people off guard because he just spammed the same unit 40 times. No, he brought stuff for Horde that made sure that he did good Ork stuff that he was supposed to do on the actual wall, right? He still had the pressure, the punching, the threat, and instead of saying I'm just gonna call the wall and touch you, it's I'm gonna call the wall and punch you off the table, which was really sick because he ended up going into the 4th round and getting a tie into the person who got first place here. So we'll take a look at that. I do have a couple little notes about it because it was an Adeptus Mechanicus list. So I'm, I haven't been gracious enough to play a bunch of AdMech games. David Dakka does have AdMech, but he hasn't been able to play it since we're doing the channel all the time. So I do have some notes about it, but I do like AdMech. They're just expensive, so you don't see them too often, which makes the matchup even harder to win because you're not familiar with them. So Rad Zone's all about pressure because it's looking to push armies and keep them into their deployment zones. They're dishing out mortal wounds and focusing on battle shock tests. There's different conditions you can choose, like taking D3 mortals and auto passing battle shock. There's munition manipulative buffs for giving lethals. You can get 4-up invuln once per game. And then they actually have other movement shenanigans. So we have a tech priest manipulist for that shenanigans, a techno archaeologist, 2 of those gets 1 unit of rangers, followed by 2 units of vanguards, 1 Iron Strider Ballistari unit, 1 Cataphrone Breacher unit. Like we said, they can actually get lethals and 4-up invuln. They have 2 units of the Sky Stalkers, followed by 2 units of the Sterilizers, 3 units of Cerberus Raiders, a 3-man and 3 units of Disintegrators. Got us. So this Disintegrators are kind of like their versions of tanks. Pretty good points value for that. So movement shenanigans here. I'll just pull up real quick. Something that I noticed as well was something like the Cerberus Raider unit. So the Cerberus Raider unit already have a 9-inch scout, followed by a 12-inch movement. Like I'm always warning Ork players whenever you're playing something like a Dread Mob or maybe a Warhorde truck spam, or you're playing a bunch of squigs and you squig hauling noise, you know that other armies that have similar units to this will just say, for example, Drakari with their Beastmaster unit, where they get 9-inch scout and then they get a 12-inch movement as well. They can take a big model count unit. In this case, these Cerberus Raiders aren't big model count, but they're like cavalry units, so they do have big bases, and they get the scout right in front of you. And then they get to all make a normal move. Yeah, they can make a normal move up to 6 inches if you end with 9 of them, as long as they move wholly within another unit of a battle line, Adeptus Mechanicus unit, or simply just a D6. So these guys can end up moving around and screening in front of those guys. They also have, I think, reactive move on a different unit. I'm not sure about that. Oh, the Flamer Chickens also have the Flamer Chickens. The Flamer Jetpack Boys also have abilities too. So I think I went too far ahead. Let me get back. Yeah. Oop. Yeah, went too far ahead. There we go. So he does have a good amount of movement shenanigans also here. The Cerberus Raiders don't have flamers. The Sterilizers don't have flamers. They have just D3 shots. So list is mostly about moving, fast speed, keep you within 6 to be annoying. And yeah, especially if you go first, you have that scouting potential behind that. And they just have a good amount of unit count. So overall, I would say that'd be quite difficult. I think most people will concede that if you have never gone into a faction and you go into them at a tournament level, sure, the player is going to be, even if they're honest, is going to let you know what it's going like, but it could very much catch you off guard. And I know something like that going into an AdMech list would catch me off guard. So both these guys tied in here. So how they did at the end would really offset that, right? Their overall score would offset that. That's how that player got first. So shout out to Blake for pulling that off, because not only did he go into a cheeky army that was also fast, so he had Cult of Speed to help kind of manage that, which I'm sure made it more fun, right? Because You're going to AdMech, that's where something like War Bikers come into play. Squighog Boys come into play. Even Storm Boys, where you can take Storm Boys in advance and charge all game, they can end up running into units like of AdMech Battle Line units and start beating them up and bullying them. War Bikers with their kind of array of Dakka shots and twin length and that. So I really like to see always just more tools than you really expect. It's just up to you to Ork play. Remember, you got to use all those assets. Use all your bullets, your firearms, your CP, each year model. Be safe. Be safe when movement and everything. So let's go into his last matchup because I'm just really impressed and happy with Blake Jones getting this off. So we got his final matchup going into Chaos Space Marines with the veterans of the Long War. So we have Abaddon the Spoiler, Chaos Lord with Warp Master's Gift, and then Master of Executions. One cultist mob followed by 2 units of legionnaires, 3 rhinos, 1 land raider followed by a big brick of chosen, a forge fiend. Then he immediately went to allies with plague marine brick. So this list was end up just felt very elite to me, right? Which means it's not doing very well into something like that Cult of Speed list, right? You can see he has Abaddon, a Land Raider, Big Brick of Chosen. Each of those already is pulling up 250, 250, 250, and then a Forge Fiend. Boom. He's already at 1,000 points between just those 4 units, and then everything else is kind of just chaffish. And even then, something like a Land Raider requires more assets to go into for it to be useful. It means they're all going to be kind of impact with each other into one big Death Star, right? When the people mention the Death Star, it means kind of like Star Wars Death Star, where there's one focal point of just pure death, which is how this list ends up kind of working. He does have a bunch of transport, which maybe is best assets, but he ended up just, overall having this many killy yet durable, more durable than you expect assets catches most people off guard. And so there's multiple battle wagons. If you choose one battle wagon to stop gas, then the beast boss gets out, maybe with some Gretchen, and then he runs you down. He punches your anti-tank thing that popped the battle wagon. If you decide I don't want a bunch of OCN bodies in my face because I don't want 10 Gretchen plus 10 beast snaggle boys and a beast boss in my face, because I don't want to lose all my primary and I don't want this stuff in my face on the wall to try to clean up, then I'm going to pop that battle wagon. Well, then Ghaz gets out and he gets to run into you. Then the Death Copters get to run over, and if anything that stood in the way to shoot at you or to try to get in the way to screen you gets to just take a bunch of blast. Damage 3 profiles on there. You still got the War Bikers to run into any kind of T3 screens, even just T4, T5 infantry, because the War Bikers are T6. They can kind of get stuck in a fight. And these Squigwog boys, maybe they're playing reserve. They can come off the battlefield flanks or the edges of the battlefield, because if you stick them in the middle, they're really going to die. But if you run them off a battlefield side where they're not going to take a bunch of firepower and then get stuck in another fight with another infantry, get into like a skirmish, you can get value off that as well. They act maybe as an escort as your Death Copters move up one of the side of the fields, right? Because only one's going to pop the 4-up invuln per turn. That's going to be the one that's maybe responsive, right? It's going to maybe shoot for you. Maybe it's the one that wants to do a reactionary move for you. Maybe the War Bikers do a reactionary move. CP management is a factor in this as well. So it is pressure. It's really gun-ho. I'm under the impression that, yeah, he very much did, because battle wagons are so big and he still has Coptas and Bikers. Maybe he put one Copta unit into Deep Strike because he knew he was going to go so far forward that he can get off with that. But yeah, this sort of matchup of this veterans of the Long War, they're not getting a bunch of value out of their detachment rule into any one unit, unless you're going to be like, I get to do it into Ghaz. But there's still multiple wagon. You got to chew through a wagon. You got to chew through the Mega Knobs, and you got to get to Makari if you're not in lethal range or throwing grenade range, and you actually have to shoot it in through the invuln of a 2-up. It's really annoying. And if you don't, then if you don't focus on him, he gets to run into you. Feels really good. I like to see that. Nothing in his list, right? So he ended up winning that game and ended up going 4-0-1. So shout out to Blake Jones. But just in summary of his list, as we're looking at it, nothing's the epicenter of this list. You can argue Ghaz's because he's Ghaz, right? You could argue that. But in reality, what the list doesn't fully revolve around just Ghaz. He has a bunch of different assets for scoring. Yeah, they can get in a little bit of a fight here and there. The Death Copters act as the mobile file support, but at the same time, they have good OC. They have deep striking so they can stay safe, and they have the ability to 4-up invuln so they can actually tank oncoming damage as well, right alongside those battle wagons, because you're not going to be able to hide everything, but you should be slowly edging everything off the battlefield. That's kind of just how Cult of Speed works. So threat saturation, a lot of different units, but I love that they're all kind of sitting around 200 to 150 points. A couple units squeeze above that for for, like Ghaz, of course. But all in all, really in favor of how he ran this list. Not having faster than use, like someone said in chat, could faster than use been worked? Yeah, you would think he would put faster than use on one of these, the beast boss, but he might just be under the impression that I just never need it. It was pretty cool. He said, "Don't edge for too long," but I'm gonna. So that's what's going on here. So shout out to Blake Jones for his Cult of Speed. Whoa! Because man, guys, like I said, today's about the exceptions. Today's about the exceptions. So I know where none of us are really sold on Cult of Speed. None of us are really happy about the total state it's at. But shout out to Blake Jones for standing on business and getting the best record that I've ever seen on Cult of Speed in the history of WAAAGH Tactics since 10th edition started. So shout out to Blake Jones. And speaking of exceptions, we move on to the next Dread Mob exception. We have Bed Tinker. Yes, Bed Tinker. So Ben Tinker decided he had enough of people talking bad about the Stompa. He, had watched all the videos and said, you know what? I decided that I'm going to listen to the opinion and advice of WAAAGH Tactics. If you guys didn't know, I'm putting my fingers up in quotations. I'm just joking. But what the only reason I'm saying that is because I very much is under the impression that I love the Stompa. And ever since the Dread Mob came out, I was like, let's start running the Stompa, right? And consistently we get it. And sure, when it first dropped in 10th edition and the book first dropped, people were running the Stompas at GTs and had a bit of success. A little less common now. Yeah, here we are, Pariah Nexus. Ben Tinker has brought back the Stompa for all of our sakes, to represent the Great WAAAGH and to represent all of the Walker Dread mobs. So we have Ben Tinker's 4-in-1 Dread Mob list. So he did go to a Moab 40K 2024. This was in Wales. He did end up getting 4th place. I will say, yes, he did lose his first game, but he made up for it by getting 3 100-point games and then a 98-point win. Plus, he's staying the Stompa, so he still gets the exception. I don't care. Awesome job by him. Let's take a look at this Dread Mob list. So we have a Big Mac. Yes, the Big Mac making another appearance. So this is the week after Southern Wales, Australia. Thank you. And this is the weekend after we've seen the Big Mac at the London Grand Tournament, and they had Big Macs there. Of course, we know 2nd place, but we have it here, this Dread Mob list with Ben Tinker. Now, do I still highly advise that you run a Big Mac in Warhorde? Typically, yes, typically in Warhorde, because you can stack movement potentials on it, so you can get him to move faster. Yet in this Dread Mob ability and an enhancement that he stuck on it, it's very clear to us that he took this, pressed it faster, and stuck it right alongside a big brick of mech guns with smash it guns on them. So we have a Big Mech with press it faster as the enhancement. That way he gets 2 buttons that can go off, so he has to roll for both of them. You cannot choose one and then roll for the other. You do have to roll for both of them, so do not get duplicates, but hey, it's about luck, right? We have a Big Mech with shock attack gun with Gift Finder goggles, because you got to ignore cover. A basic mech with super glowy things, because you had 20 points left over, because that's how it works out sometimes. Sometimes that can be cool, right? Because if they take a battle shock test and they fail it, then they can't pop Armor of Contempt anymore. That would feel really good. Zagra Wartsnaga, because reactionary move 12 on Dread Mob is fantastic, but also board control with your Stompa is important too, right? Getting alpha strikes by just simply 8-bound running at you and punching you, or Angron running straight into your face would be stupid. So having this kind of thing does help greatly. So he has 1 big unit of Gretchen, but beyond that, he simply went for 4 minimum size units of Gretchen. No more 20-man units, nothing other than that. Just 1 big one for Zod. 2 trucks, a big brick of Ludas with the spanners both having rockets for, of course, the shock attack gun. 2 basic mechs with smasher guns, then the big unit of masher guns that have the mech next to them. Now that they have the mech with them, because the mech allows those guys to stage up in a terrain piece and then simply walk right through the terrain piece, right? He allows them to pass through terrain or enemies as if they aren't there. Therefore, you put those mech guns right along the wall, because they only move 3 inches, and you get you that full movement right up to the other side of the wall. That allows them to get line of sight, because these guys are very, very hard to get into the line of sight. But when they do, they go off so hard on anything that is elite infantry of 3 wounds. I mean, they just go off so hard, because Strength 9, -3, 3 damage. If you get, press it faster, you can get lethal and sustain. There are arguments that you can choose to shoot other targets with this, of course, because you can just re-roll the whole hit roll for 1 CP. Typically, though, when you're looking at the Stompa on your list, when I tell you to play the Stompa, and I'm always advising people to play the Stompa, you want to think about it like you're going to drop 2 to 3 CP on the Stompa every single shooting phase. So you're going to use 1 CP to make it re-roll for Dakka. You're possibly and most likely going to use 1 CP for bring it down, or sorry, for big shells for bigger gets, so you can bring down bigger targets. But if you don't, you're still going to want 1 CP in your back pocket so that you can re-roll the Death Cannon, because it's 3d6. That's all one profile, meaning you can just re-roll the entire thing if you roll poorly. It's not like you have to roll 3 individual ones. Therefore, just know, yes, I am very in favor of the big mech, and I'm in favor of 3 mech guns in general. Even with the SAG, it feels really good. The infantry, the meta is very full of a lot of elite infantry. You can get off and even kind of transports off on this and destroy them in other ways. There's a good amount of AP, something Orks lacking. But they have a hard time moving around the battlefield, and typically there's other stuff that's going to pull a CP in. That's why putting Pass It Fasta on this unit makes up for the fact that you're not going to get the CP investment. So, of course, I know there's cool things you can do with this combination with the Smash It guns, and I do advise that sometimes you consider them, with something like a shock attack gun. But in this case, you can see he's using the Big Mech. That's even cooler because this is the Battle Force box that just came out. He's ended up using the Battle Force box in his GT performing list of going 4-1. So this should make anybody very excited that picked up that box set, because you can see he really did stick that alongside of it. I know seeing mech guns doesn't make you excited as they're like really expensive, but that's not here or there. So 2 5-man units of Storm Boys, because someone's got to score you some points. Like I tell people all the time, if you wonder why there's 2 Storm Boys on the list, just know you do not have to put both of them into the Deep Strike. A lot of times you only want to put one into Deep Strike, keep one in the battlefield near 12 inches of the center of the battlefield, or do secondaries, or you might want to even keep both, and because with the Stompa, you need to control the battlefield, the space around your Stompa. It's very important that you don't let people come off the battlefield edges with something like an Eradicator brick and one tap your Stompa. It's very important you don't let a unit of World Eaters or other Orks with a Beast Boss just simply run down your Stompa. Therefore, having Storm Boys that can either get out of your Stompa or simply be near there and stand in front of people will make a big difference in that. So board control helps. That's the reason why Zagrat's on this list. That's the reason why the big mech's on this list, so he can actually stage up those mech guns that are really slow and move. So a lot of movement taken into consideration of this list, and hedging it against some of our bets. Really fun to see when people still decide to bring the Ludo brick, even though they already have the Stomp on the list. So this list, even though you're looking at it, you're like, that's a lot of Dakka. It is a lot of Dakka. Just keep in mind that this player was on their P's and Q's, because there's a lot of potential of you getting tagged and run over because you don't have a lot of punching clapback. You're really relying on all these grounds right here to just hold the line, and Zod to hold the line while everybody else kind of lays down the hate. So let's take a look into Ben Tinker's win path, because like I mentioned, he did lose his first game. So in his first game, he went into Necron's Annihilation Legion. So Annihilation Legion is a little weird. It's not the most meta, in some ways it's just inferior to other detachments. I forgot what the detachment I would say. What's the detachment people are playing right now? I'm having a brain fart. Either way, that's not here or there. What it does have is lightning fast reactions, so he can actually give units -1 to hit. They also get some detachment bonuses. I'll show you right now when I show a couple data sheets. So real quick, what's on the list though is a Deceiver Catan, a Nightbringer Catan, a basic Transcendent Catan, Hexmark Destroyer, followed by 2 Scorpion loads with enhancements, 1 unit of Battle Line Immortals, just 5-man unit, a unit of Scarab Swarms, 2 5-man units of Flayed Ones, 2 individual Locust Destroyers, followed by 2 big bricks of Scorpex Destroyers, and 1 3-man unit of Scorpex Destroyers with 2 3-man units of Tomb Blades. So what the heck's going on here? So we have the Annihilation Legion. Annihilation protocol allows, what the heck is happening here? Sorry, this pulled up. I'll pull this back down in my way. Yeah, get out of here. All right, so they allow you to reroll charges And if someone's below half, you get to re-roll, add 1 to the charge. That's not great, but that's not really necessarily the purpose. You can also regen people. So he did bring these big boys of Scorpack Destroyers, not highly impressive like they used to be. They get a respectable amount of punches, 4 attacks, strength 7, -2 damage. You can re-roll hit rolls of 1. And if you made a charge roll, you can re-roll the whole hit roll once. You can pop devastating wounds on this. And then if you look aside the character you stick alongside them, he does give them lethals. Therefore, he would give them lethals, so you can get lethals and devastating. So that one turn those guys run in, they can really, really cleave you up. And they also get devastating wounds off the Crimson Harvest from the Scorpack Destroyer. So having some mortals does matter, but having that just innate ability to just smash through when they hit you, and having these Katans. What I will say is the Nightbringer, right? I've played Stompa games into the Nightbringer, and you can either completely just annihilate the Nightbringer, or he just makes all his 4 invulns, he halves your damage, and then he just rolls some good feel no pains. I've had it where the Nightbringer started taking out monoliths and took down the Silent King, and then the Nightbringer walked into him because the Nightbringer is so tiny he can just run from building to building, right? Keep in mind, how are you going to get the Nightbringer from getting to you? And he's re-rolling these charges. He's slowly moving towards your Stompa, and other things getting in the way, right? You got the Destroyer's going to be running in the front of him, shooting stuff away. The Immortals clearing up those grots, because like we see in a Ben Tinker's list, he doesn't have a lot of screening besides the grots. That one grot unit. Other than that, that Destroyer unit's looking at Zod Zod's unit like, all right, I'll run into you. Therefore, the Nightbringer can slowly, methodically make his way over to that Stompa, and then he does mortal wounds at the end of fighting, so he can chip the Stompa. He actually fights at about strength 14, good AP, D6 damage. So he prolongs and holds the Stompas in place and takes his attention. And even fighting with him, he can hold him in place. It's happened to me. So I'm just saying that's not including the other shards and the fact that he doesn't have a lot of typical, let's say there is big 22-man units of grass in the way, hold him off a little bit. But it is just so hard to get something like a Catan off of you, and we don't really know what the mission was. He could have just made, because you get to re-roll the charges, some big long bomb charge into the Stompa or something. Very important, though, is to teach you, regardless, just looking at that Necron list, it's clear to see that how you died was getting charged, right? Nonetheless, no matter what it is, by a Destroyer brick or by one of these Catans, that's the only reason why Ben would lose 47 points like that. Therefore, I behoove anybody who wants to play their Stompa, as much as I respect the shooting options that he chose, that way he was able to annihilate people the rest of the games going forward. Keep in mind, when you're playing your Stompa, a lot of the time people are worried about getting your Stompa shot away. That's very common if you're going to play against your Space Marine friend. But all in all, in 40K, getting shot away with a Stompa isn't always likely. It's actually more likely that you get beat up at mid-range or in combat, because lethal, devastating wounds, mortal wounds come and play in closer ranges. Therefore, that's more likely what took on Ben Stompa in one go in that list. And here we go. So, like to see. And yeah, someone brought up the fact that the trucks are interesting choices there. The trucks are interesting choices. I like to think it's most likely kind of like the shout out to Mr. Initiative, where he was taking those shock attack gun units and he was putting them in the trucks. That way they can get line of sight to people when they do get on objectives, right? Because looters are so slow, especially a big 10-man unit, that there's a chance that you want to stage it up. And then when people do move into the mid table, you kind of edge around the terrain that's on the edge of the table. That way you can get a straight line of sight down up across multiple objectives, right? So a lot of the time, one of the trucks is going to maybe have a grot unit, one's going to have the big mech with shock attack gun unit. Therefore, you can get line of sight. So good call out by Chad by that. As for mentioning the truck, then we go on to his second matchup. So after he got the dust knocked off his Stompa, I'm sure it was on the shelf for a while, he went into the Space Wolves with the Champions of Rust. So we have Arjak Rockfist, that guy's made for destroying vehicles. We have Bjorn the Fell-Handed, he's made for roaming Ork stratagems. We have Hardborg Deathwolf, followed by Librarian Phobos Armor, Lord Grimnar, Ragnar Blackname, and Wolf Lord on Thunderwolf. We have an assault intercessor unit, followed by a basic intercessor unit, one unit of Friend Region Wolves, infiltrators, long fanes, scouts, 2 big bricks of Thunderwolf cavalry, a 5-man unit of Terminators, followed by a Wolfen. So we do have the Thunderwolf cavalry in this case as well. But if I've if there's one thing you got to know, is that the Thunderwolf Camely is getting blown away or swept away by a Stompa. Stompa can just sweep 4 damage by bringing clinking claws, so you can wound him on 2s, so he'll have sustain in 2s probably if you choose to. But you don't necessarily want to let your Stompa get charged. Therefore, it's more likely that you're just going to shoot into them. Normally, a lot of the time, Bjorn can just stand up to people and be like, you can't shoot me away, especially Orks. Bjorn is getting clapped by a Stompa. Really like to see that. Wasn't the most meta version of a Space Wolf list. You know, Champions of Rust, a little bit thematic, a lot of characters up in that list. There were some potent, data sheets and rules that are going to be possibly taking a hit in the future on there. But all in all, there wasn't enough redundancy, and like anti-tank, there was no Vindicators on there. Vindicators are actually hard for a Stompa to take out, but in that case, there wasn't one. So let's check out his next list. Going into his game 3, he's going into Chaos Knights. Yes, I've done this game and it feels good. So we have Chaos Knight Crastus. We have a Knight Desecrator, 4 Brigands, 1 Executioner, and then 2 Carnivores. So one thing I will keep in mind is that if you let all of these Brigands get in the way, or if you let one of these Knights get a hold of your Stompa, yeah, you can get desecrated. But the thing is, as either one of these 2 big boys moves across the table, automatically getting annihilated by the Stompa. I've taken the Stompa RTTs, went out 3-0, specifically went against a Knight player, and you 100% of the time taking down one of these big Knights. You're taking down multiple of the baby Knights, though. It's a real thing. We'll take away here, right? Because you can pop big shells for bigger gets and re-roll hits, and you have the super Gatling gun. The super Gatling gun itself goes up to flat 3 damage. You just end up just kind of barraging them with winning them in 4s instead. So there's anyone they fail, they take 4 damage. They automatically get shipped horribly. You can use your big Death Cannon to blow away 1. Use your rocket and your Gatling to blow away another 1. Boom, you're killed 2 easily. Not even shoot your other guns. Don't worry about taking a bunch of hazarded chest. Next turn, you do it again, right? It's very, if it's a big one, you focus those big 3 guns on there. You have the Luda Brick, so the Luda Brick can take down one of these guys, especially if they go on an objective, which they have to. Even in Overwatch, you can take them down if you don't finish them off for some reason. You can loot them on Overwatch when they cross across the battlefield. And then, of course, you have the big unit of mech guns. The big mech can actually stage up and then jump out and shoot those guys as well. The Brigands would normally feel safe. In this case, they're not. So you're pressing it twice, right? You're pressing the button twice. That means you can get lethals and, sustain. So, hey, it is what it is. So that would be a very gratifying list to go up into, I would say, as an Ork player. Speaking somewhat anecdotally from my own perspective as well, it does feel good when you're playing with your Stompa and you're playing Dread Mob and you go into some of these nights and you're like, I actually have all this stuff to mess you up. Normally I have to run across the field and play terrain, play really cunning. In this place, I'm just I'm just blowing them across the battlefield. So it feels really good. So that was game 1, game 2, and then he's going to his 4th game. So now we go into his 4th game. We went to another Knights player. Oh, and before you talk about the other Knights player, let's talk about Aaron, none of your business. He said, I just got fired. More time for Warhammer, baby. And lucky you print them. Therefore, you didn't need money anyways, right? So shout out to you, dude. You should have all the time to print even more boys for the Great WAAAGH. So shout out to Aaron. Hopefully you're joking, or hopefully you're getting spirits because you'll be all right. So shout out to you, Aaron. Then we move on to thank you for the chat, by the way. That's fun. More anybody that does it, I appreciate it. Then we go into his 4th game. So again, he's going in tonight. And like I said before, game match before this, not gonna elaborate too much on it because I just did. But this feels good, my boys. It feels good. It's not like playing against Imperial Knights where they have Canis Rex and they have all these long range Knights that can end up shooting you, right? Chaos Knights are looking to get stuck in, especially their big boys. So they're looking to get stuck in, and then their Brigands are like, oh, please, I'm going to shoot you with my 12 strength 12 Melta. Oh, no. And then they get blown away. So it's fantastic. So you have a Knight Abominant, Knight Despoiler, War Stalker, a Brigand, a Carnivore, and then a nice big old Knight Castleless Propathy. I don't even know what that is. I'm not going to get too into it because that's definitely more meme-ish in that case. Of course, you blew him away because the Stompa can blow away any of those guys. Whoa, Blanca Gomez. And then we got some more walls. Let's get some walls in chat, dude, for a Stompa annihilating a bunch of walkers, Imperial walkers, and Great and Chaos walkers. So then he goes into his final matchup where the real challenge lies in World Eaters. So we have Angeron, Lord Invocatus for that early game pressure. scouting. We have 2 units of Jackal for sticky, 3 basic 3-man units of 8-bound. I really like that personally, right? I don't play World Leaders, don't play World Leaders. A lot of games against World Leaders, but I don't play them. I would say I would feel like I would take a minimum of 2 of these guys, right? And it's not just because they're killing potential, not just because they're speed. I like that they have an aura of reroll ones to wound. Then we have 3 units of Exalted 8-bound. These are the straight killers, though, right? So he went 2 3-man units here and then a big brick. I like that. I do. It seems like there's always a reason to have one of these big bricks of Exalted 8-bound to really punch something off the table if Angron can't get around to it. Therefore, having everybody else's 3s feels good for unit count. 2 units of 3 World Eaters spawn and then a Carnivore. So keep this in mind, guys, that even though he did play into silly list prior to this, this is a legit list. I've seen this legit list on other grand tournament levels, been getting high level wins, events like that. Very much like this, spamming a lot of a small amount of units of World Eaters and 8-bound matters, and then having Angron on that list, having just enough scouting with that big exalted unit of 8-bound, and just throwing waves of the 3-man units, Angron coming back, surgically annihilating the enemy as you can advance and charge and really punch people away even with these 3-man units and get amazing trades. So it's real. And the fact that this exalted 8-bound unit and Angron themselves can just punch you away means you had to be very respectful, which is why I mentioned earlier that having the picks like Zagrot Wartsnack, a bunch of 10-man units of Grots, having even trucks, or keeping your Storm Boys on the table would help offset this matchup, right? Because if you end up thinking, okay, none of my Storm Boys are going in Deep Strike in this game, therefore, you can choose to keep one of the Storm Boys units in your transport if you chose to. Let's say that you had a blind spot and you wanted him to come and sneaky out instead of getting charged. But in reality, you can use your Storm Boys to run out and stand in the way, like I said, of World Eaters and all these Grot units. You can put one of your trucks with Grots in them, throw them up, they run into that, and then the Grots get out, and then you have another roadblock, right? Not to mention that you have the Smasher guns that they can end up blowing away all of these 3 wound units easily, because these guys don't actually have 2-up armor saves and armor of contempt. They do have feel no pains, but you have nasty damage 3 that anytime they don't, they're just getting annihilated. So you end up having the board control of the amount of screens, because these are multiple different units, so they require more activations, and then that can actually get in the way, and then enough response units that can shoot. So very much as we look at Ben Tinker and his matchup, and he had to go over several kind of meme-ish lists in the middle section of his run, he did have to face at least very respectable World Eaters at the end, and that so shows that he did have very good awareness and battlefield control around his Stompa, because if you're going to win your Stompa games, you have to control the presence around it. It's not simply about moving it, pointing it, and shooting it. It's about keeping him alive to get through the later turns and get as many activations off as possible with him, and then bring in enough support Dakka that can actually get angles of fire. Because remember, your Stompa is slow as heck and it can't move. Therefore, there are blind spots where enemies might want to stage. That's where having a Luda bomb with the truck, so that the SAG can actually run down the lane, should look at someone that's behind a terrain piece touching an objective, and then blow them off the table where the Stompa couldn't see them to begin with. So I really much appreciated this list. I always say Zagrot Wartsnaga is amazing in Dread Mob. You can, of course, choose not to run him, but just letting the enemy know that I can reactive move and readjust and surround your charging move. Let's say your exalted 8-bound unit. Well, probably not exalted 8-bound unit, but let's say one of your 8-bound units and your Jackal units are going to charge into me. They're trying to create space. You can even reactive move and surround them so that they get no pylons or consolidates. Therefore, they're standing out in the open next turn. Your Smasher guns can kill them, right? Instead of letting them charge into you, getting more space and then consolidating onto an objective, or just charging into you and standing behind a terrain piece so your Smasher guns can't see them. Now I'm going to reactive move into you. That way you're just going to charge 1 inch and you're going to pile in right there, and then you're going to be standing in the middle of the table and I'm going to blow you away. So Zod and the reactive move itself from Dread Mob are when you get the value there as well. So shout out to Ben Tinker for going 4-1 with the Stompa Dread Mob. Whoa! Because today was the day of the exceptions. So, boys, in the day of the exceptions, I hope that everybody stayed happy and positive. We do have our interview with Mr. Initiative from 40K in 40 minutes. So, of course, if you're a channel member, go into our post, check out the post that we made about that, ask questions. We'll be answering them. It will be live as well. So if you show up for the stream on our Friday stream, regular stream time, you can just ask him directly. Get stuck in. We're going to talk all things 40K. And of course, we should be excited about the points to come, because regardless if you think orcs are going to get all the love we want, we do know that some gets that are maybe a little too potent are going to get, we'll just say, adjusted, right? Therefore, we should have at least a little bit more of a balance brought into the game and bring everybody nice, happy, and at the place that we want to be. So, DS balls, everybody should be interested in the balance A. So thank you to everybody who was here. You know, I appreciate you guys showing up. Leave any thoughts or comments that you fit your stuff you want to see or that you want to hear. Please leave a like and subscribe, because even though the Great WAAAGH is suffering, doesn't mean our sub count should. So whoa to everybody who showed up to the live stream, and thank you all. But there's always one thing to keep in mind. It's don't cross our wall, because we knock your teeth out. Whoa.